my name is Helen Molesworth. I am the Chief Curator at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Los Angeles. Well, it's really great there. They're curious because it's really great there. Los Angeles in the American context is mythic because there are all these cliches. LA is a 21st century city. It's a new city. It's the end of the road in America. Like, it's the end of westward expansion. And that myth is a very powerful myth in American identity. But it's also true that you can do things in LA that you can't do in other places. People are a little more free. There's more room. There's more light. People are interested in... It's hard to describe. I think in LA, people are interested in what you're doing now. No one ever asks you in LA, where did you go to school? Where in New York, Boston, that's the first question. Where'd you go to school? Because they want to know where to place you in this trajectory. In LA, that's not important. Where's your studio? That's the question. Where's your studio? Well, I think MOCA historically had a really important role in Los Angeles because it's not so old. MOCA is formed in the mid-1980s by artists because there was no museum of contemporary art in Los Angeles. So I think for the last 20 years, or the first 20 years of its life, from like 1984 to 2004, MOCA was the contemporary art museum, and it was alone in that way in the landscape. I think what's happened since then, the art schools in Los Angeles became so important. The world became more networked, more international. And so if you were an artist in Los Angeles, you didn't have to move to New York anymore. It used to be that if you were an artist, you had to move to New York. But that changed. And then now there's a lot of gallery activity. I don't know. It's hard for me to know how it's going to be different because I have only been there for a year and a half. But I find it very exciting because I like to be in a big city with a really diverse range of opportunities. Like, I don't want to be the only museum in the city. I want to be able to go and see lots of other exhibitions at galleries, at museums, and artist-run spaces. So for me, the situation in Los Angeles feels very organic. I don't feel like there's some outside force. I feel like the city is getting what it needs and wants. And so I trust it. I trust the development. I don't know if you have to be global, but I think you have to be cosmopolitan. I don't think global for its own sake is very interesting. I don't think you should be looking as a curator at your checklist and saying, do I have, enough artists from Latin America or Brazil? But I do think you have to, one of the things I like to say about Los Angeles is I like the museum to in some way reflect my drive to work. And my drive to work in LA is amazing. I wake up in a neighborhood that is filled with elderly African Americans, and I drive through then a Jewish community of people from Persia, Little Tokyo, half of Central America, Guatemala, El Salvador, Ecuador, and then through the banking district, and then I'm at my job. I want a museum that embodies the world that I live in. No, it's not a regulated market. There's no regulation. There's no regulation in the galleries. And there's not that kind of I mean there is a general code of ethics for museum professionals. Like I can't. Like, I know that I'm going to make a show with Anna Maria Maialino. Like, I can't go now and buy work by Anna Maria Maialino. This is also impossible because I cannot afford a work by Anna Maria Maialino. So whatever. It's high-minded, but it's also just reality. But no, there was nothing in the American museum system right now that would have the board of trustees not buy her. In fact, I want them to buy her work, and I want them to promise it to the museum. Like, I want them to participate in creating, the reception of her work in the United States. So if one of my board members came to me right now and said, I want to buy a work by Anna Maria Maialino, I would say, let me help you get the best one available. And would you make it a promise gift to the museum? That would be how I would see my role. Or, if you want one, I'll help you. Will you buy one for the museum and one for you? So like we would already be looking to work in a partnership with the board to benefit the institution. But yeah, as in terms of like a code of ethics, for that, not regulated. Not a regulated market. I don't know if that's what I want. I wish there was more, like, in my country, there is no public money for art. And there is an enormous amount of public money for the military. And I would like 1% of the amount of money that my country spends on the military would change the landscape of cultural institutions in my country. And while we're at it, then we could take also another % of that military budget and put it in the public school system. I mean, I would much rather that the patrons of museums send their children to the public schools than regulate the art market. Like, the crisis in my country is not about a board member buying a work by Anna Maria Maialino before I do a show of her at MOCA. That's not where the crisis is. We've produced 3 generations of Americans who don't vote. And they don't vote because they haven't been well educated. And they haven't been well educated because middle-class white people don't send their children to the public school. So we've just got bigger problems. We just have bigger problems. So if you don't have a public school education, then art can only be for the wealthy. Then culture is not available for a democratic society. Well, when I started in the museum world, the line was really strong. Museums didn't ask galleries for money. The line between public and private was very firm. The galleries were about money, and the museums were about scholarship. But it's not like that anymore. The line is very, very blurred. And it's blurred on both sides. Some of the galleries started doing incredible scholarship and keeping amazing archives. And they have been working with artists for 20, 30 years, and they knew more than anyone in the museum knew. In the meantime, the museums, they lost their way, and they had to compete with other forms of entertainment. And so they started to become more populist in their outlook. They needed more money. There was what little government funding we used to have completely evaporated. And so now the line is very blurred. And in a way, I almost don't think it matters what I think about it. It just is. Like, it just is blurred. And so now I think you just have to try and be very thoughtful in every instance and try to be ethical instead of moral. So there's no right and wrong. There's only every situation has a better or a worse solution, and you're trying always for the better one. In the United States, those patrons don't have to give, they're under no obligation to give you money, right? So they're giving you money for a variety of reasons. Because they believe in the social good. That's the best reason. And you try to encourage that. You try to... we try to make the argument always about what's the difference between collecting for a museum and collecting for home. Like the kind of work that you might want to live with in your living room, the same artist might make a very different work for the work that is designed for the public space of the museum, that's designed to create a certain kind of conversation, a certain kind of debate. It's hard because the galleries, you can look at it two ways. You can think, well, those are the 5 galleries with the best taste, and they've got all the really good artists, or you can see them as a kind of oligarchy. Both things are true. You don't have to choose, right? And so one of the things, and we had this at everywhere I've worked, you're paying attention when those names, when your curators are in the room and people start talking about who they want to work with. And if you get to a tipping point, you're like, wow, we have 3 artists on the schedule right now from that gallery. Like, we've got to pump the brakes. Are we sure those are absolutely the 3 we want to work with? Is there anyone else at the gallery we want to work with? You have to keep that as part of the balance in your program. Just like when you look at the program and, 6 days out of 7, you're like, wow, that's a lot of men on the schedule. We have to work harder, And I think the same thing is true with the gallery situation now. Because the galleries also, 15 years ago, they didn't have multiple locations. You know what I mean? Like, they didn't have, these huge international stables. If you wanted to work with a Brazilian artist, you came to Louise. It was a different kind of situation. It wasn't now, that you could go to one of these 5 or 6 galleries and they control so much. I don't think so. But you never know. I could get fired. And then I would need a job. I don't think so, because I really love museums. I love them. I've always loved them since I was a child. I like the way they make me feel. I'm a middle class kid. So I have always loved going to be able to look at art in a museum. More than a gallery, more than a biennial, it's my favorite venue. Well, of course, I think museums should be free because I think museums hold artwork in the public trust. That's what we do. I don't know a lot about the state funding. Obviously, it's going away now, and so many European are moving more to this American funding model. I think the problem with state sponsorship, and here I'm a completely ideological creature of the United States. I can't deny, right, that. But I don't want the government to run the museum. I don't want the government to dictate what work can and cannot be bought, what work can and cannot be shown. I don't want to labor under that kind of conservative cultural agenda, which is what has happened when, there has been public funding. So in order to rethink the funding structure of American museums, it would be such a massive overhaul in every way that if I'm going to spend time fantasizing about how to fix shit that's broken, for me it's about public education. Because then I think a citizenry that was educated could participate in a set of conversations about what we as a culture value. But I don't think I have no right to impose my beliefs on a public that is not educated enough. Now, there's obviously a kind of show that I think is meant just for entertainment, and those are shows that don't have any scholarship, that don't put forward a proposition. So, like in Los Angeles recently, we had this thing called the Rain Room, and that's for me, that's not art. That's because there's no proposition. There's just a trick. It's a good trick. It's like, oh, it rains inside. Like, ta-da! But it's not it doesn't, it's not participating in this multi-century tradition of this thing called art, right? That has codes and rules and terms and multiple histories and multiple coordinates that are political, ethical, aesthetic. It doesn't do any of that. So it's just something else. I don't think they would ever ask. I'm kind of nerdy. I don't go to parties. I look at work. I do my work. I go to my room. So I'm not in that social world that I imagine the curators of Documenta in Venice emerge from. Like if they ask, I'll be super interested, but I just don't think it's going to happen. I have a tendency to hire younger people, junior people. I like people who come with some art history. I like people who understand that all this shit didn't start yesterday or in the 80s, but that, I like people who understand modernism as an idea. But yeah, I like smart people. I like curious people. So those are the people I tend to hire. People who are curious and smart. Know the artists of your own generation very, very well. Befriend them and know them early. They will be the people that you carry with you for your whole rest of your life, both professional and personal. And so if you want to be a contemporary curator, go to the studios of the people your own age. Like, go and make those friendships. Talk now. I think the curators that do some of the best work are the curators who have a kind of a generational platform. You might work on an older artist, but you're friends with the artists of your generation, and they help you think better thoughts. They help you stay in the world that you are making together as a generation as you move through time. I find that to be, I think that's, and be nice and say thank you.